to put it back. You want to make sure that spacer is on there and all the way down. It's also a good idea when you're in here, go ahead, you can put a little anti-seize on these things just in case if you ever have to get back into it again, it won't be such a pain. If there's any corrosion or rust or anything like that involved, put a little anti-seize on there so these parts will move a little freer. You'll slide this back on. You shouldn't have to force it much. You should never have to hit it with a hammer. You pop it with the palm of your hand and get it back on there. Make sure it's spinning freely, not making a lot of noise because there are bearings in here. Make sure those bearings are still moving freely and not making a lot of noise, and you'll know that that's working properly. You'll take this, assuming it's been removed. There's a hole right here. It's got some silicone around it. You'll pull your wires from your clutch back through that hole. You'll line your keyway here, up with your keyway here. You'll put the face of this back on. Again, not too difficult. And this is what you should end up with when you're done. Ready to have your clutch bolt reinstalled. When you reinstall your clutch bolt, you want to put anti-seize on there, a good high strength anti-seize on this bolt, and you're going to want to torque it down to 55 foot-pounds of pressure to make sure that this is on there tight enough to hold it, but not so tight that you'll cause damage to the inside of the workings of this clutch. So we're going to put some Loctite on this thing, and we're going to tighten it down. Okay, whenever you go to reinstall this clutch bolt, you need to put some Loctite on this bolt. The red formula, the high strength one, is generally sufficient to do that, but you don't want this clutch bolt to back out. It has a lock washer on it, but for extra precaution, extra safety, we're going to put some Loctite on this bolt when we tighten it back up. Now you probably noticed that we've have taken this off and putting it back on with a torque wrench. You don't need a torque wrench, obviously, to take something off, but you need a torque wrench when you put this back on because it needs to go to 55 pounds of torque. So we'll take our torque wrench, we'll get our backup wrench on the housing here, and I'm going to bring this thing down to 55. I'll do that again. Okay, we got our backup wrench on here. I'm going to tighten this bolt down to 55 pounds. Something else I want to show you while we're in here. You'll see this little bolt coming through here. It's actually threaded through this housing. I want to say it's a 10 millimeter bolt. This bolt is here so that periodically you can take it out and see if there's any water getting into your housing or any grease leaking anywhere. So occasionally take this bolt out from underneath the bottom here and see if you're getting water or anything coming out of it. And to be honest with you, a little bit of water probably isn't going to hurt anything. It'll certainly accelerate the corrosion process. But in the long run, a little bit of water is not going to hurt you. But ideally, you don't want any water in here. Everything will last a lot longer. Okay, we're going to go put everything back together now. Most important is before you put that outdrive back on here, you want to check and make sure that this gasket is setting down inside its groove all the way around. Now on the top, we don't have to go back with RTV silicone. On the bottom, we will. We're going to replace, there was a little bit of silicone that was put on there, obviously because this is the part that's in the water most, so we want to make extra sure that it remains watertight. So we're going to put a small amount of RTV silicone around the outside edge of this. Sensor safe is what they recommend. Doesn't take a whole lot, but you do have that gasket there. And now you're ready to put your hot drive back on. First thing you want to do, get your belt setting back on the clutch. Make sure it's right sitting on the clutch like it's supposed to, like it's done properly. And this is always a lot easier if you have someone to help you, but it can be done with just one person. Okay, this is how you do it with just one person. Again, it's a lot easier if you have two. You'll set your gear down into the belt. Gently put it back toward the housing. Have at least one of your cap screws ready to hold this in place so that you can let go and get more cap screws. Once you put the top two in, don't tighten them all the way down. But inevitably, the most difficult one to get started back is this one on the bottom because there's not a lot of room there to work. So we're going to very carefully get the bottom one started. You'll go ahead and tighten this bottom one down while you're in there. Careful not to strip it. It's good and snug. Put your remaining cap screws into the housing. Okay, with the out drive back on, you'll go ahead and put your weed guard back in place. Again, just a couple 7/16 wrenches. And you'll tighten these down. Okay, we've got the out drive back on here, we've got the weed guard back on here, the belt's in place. Now you need to retension your belt and tighten all those bolts back down before you put this top cap on. So it's basically what we did earlier, except we're doing it in reverse. We're going to come to the set screw back here, run it back up, checking our tension until we get back to about 19 pounds on this right here, mostly because it's a new belt. A new belt we want a little bit tighter than we would. Ordinarily on a used belt we'd go to 16 and stop. On a newer belt we're going to go 19, even 20 pounds and set it at that. We ran this nut back down here by hand. Now we're going to start getting some tension on it with the wrenches, 2 9/16 wrenches. And just tightening it up. Not a lot of room to work in here. Sometimes you can take a swivel head socket, make this a little, with an extension, and make it a little bit quicker. We're just tightening this up to get the belt tension back where it should be. Okay. Alright, as I begin to tighten the tension bolt back up, as soon as the belt starts to feel a little bit tight is when I'll begin to start checking. So I've tightened it up a pretty good bit. I'm pretty sure that it's still too loose, but I'm going to check it anyway. Using the same procedure that we used before. Actually, the belt is only like 10 pounds right at this point. So I need to tighten the tension bolt up some more. Now, okay, if we continue to check the tension on the belt, we're going to check it again. We just brought it up a little bit more. and we're running now right at 19, 20 pounds. Now that's for, again, that's for a new belt. These are Kevlar belts, very high quality, they're very durable, they're very strong. People ask me all the time, should I keep extra belt? If you keep this belt properly tensioned, this belt will last, I don't know how long they'll last, but we've got some that's been out there for years. So if you keep them properly tensioned, as long as nothing else goes wrong. But we'll take a new belt up to 19 or 20 pounds because the Kevlar belt will stretch, but it'll only stretch to a point. It'll only stretch maybe once or twice, and then you'll find as you continue to check your belt tension from that point on that you never really have to adjust it again because it'll have stretched all it's going to stretch, and then you'll keep it at 16 pounds from then on. After you've got the tension, you want to double check and make sure that your gears, that the teeth on these belts are lined up properly in your gears. You can run that back and forth, kind of hold it a little bit to make sure that they're not sitting on top of the gear. Because what will happen is after you get all this put back together and you crank it, it'll jump down into the gear and it'll be way too loose. So you want to make sure that it's in the gear housing at that point. We have proper tension. We know that it is in the gears like it should be. So now we're going to begin to tighten up the bolts to hold it in place. What I like what I like to do when I go to put this back together is I want to tighten the top two up here and the bottom two of the middle ones in the back. And what that does is when you loosen all this, the more you back these bolts out, the greater the distance between the motor and the bell housing. So when you tighten everything back up, the position of this bell housing will change and your tension may change. So that's why it's very important that we don't back these out any more than we need to in the beginning to move it, to accomplish what we want to accomplish, so that there's not such a difference between the tension that we have at it right now and the tension that we have once we tighten everything back up. Ready.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so I tightened the top two here, the middle two on the bottom. I'll double check my tension and make sure it hasn't changed. I'm still at 19 pounds. So now I'm ready to tighten up all the bolts, the 4 on the top, the 4 in the middle, the 4 on the bottom, and replace my belt cover.
Good.
Okay, all 12 bolts are tightened back down. The tension bolt has been secured. All that's tight. So we want to put the belt housing back on. You begin by putting silicone, again, sensor safe, RTV silicone, only here. This is the only place you need to put it. Okay, we're ready to put the belt housing back on. It's important that you make sure this pin fits into this slot right here because that's what holds your clutch in place. So just kind of, you can work it from the top. Just make sure it goes in there like that. Goes on secure. Put your 6 bolts back in, tighten it down, and you're done. Now, and that's it. It's all put back together. This RTV silicone will dry. You can just wipe it away after it's dry. For any parts or any other information, you can contact Mud Buddy at 1-801-352-8011 or whoever your point of purchase was, whether it's Bass Pro Shops or us. Or as a matter of fact, anytime you have trouble, you give us a call here at BFC Marine. We'll try to help you through it. Thanks a lot.